Hello everyone, my name is George and in today's video we are going to deal with PHP and MySQL. We are going to create a small application that allows us to upload image files to the server, store the names in a database, display the uploaded images in the browser and provide us with the option to delete them. Also, we will display errors to the user when something goes wrong. This is basic PHP and MySQL stuff that we need to know. So, let's start. Before we start coding, let's take a look at the files and folders we need. We have an index.php file which has a basic HTML structure. The important element here is the link to the style sheet. Please ignore the script tag at the end of the file. We won't be using any JavaScript in this video. I didn't notice it while recording, so it will stick there in the whole tutorial. Sorry guys. Let's move on. We have a functions.php file to write our PHP functions and a styles.css file in which I have already typed the code. I will not go through and explain the CSS file. It is not important for this tutorial, it only structures our layout. And last, we have an uploads folder to store the uploaded image files. Now, let's jump to the index file and start coding our application. The first element that we will create is the error placeholder that we saw in the introduction at the top of our layout. In this element, we will display any error that may occur when we delete an image file. Inside the element, we will create two span elements. In the first span element, we will echo with PHP the error message, and in the second span element, we will display an A tag with the text dismiss. The A tag refreshes the page and hides the error message. Next, we have a div element with a class of info. This element will display the number of images that we upload. It's the element that we see in the top right corner. Next, we have a div tag with a class of preview. It's the element in which we display the images inside. Inside the preview container, we will have another div element with a class of image wrapper. This element will include an image tag, so we can display the images from the database, and the delete image button. It's an A tag, but it is styled to look like a button, so we'll refer to it as button. Next, we have the form element. The form element has an action attribute which we leave empty. That means that the form will submit the data, in our case the image file, to the same page. Next, we set the method attribute to post and the enc type to multipart /form data. If we don't set the enc type to multipart /form data, the upload process will not work. Next, and inside the form element, we have a label to instruct the user what we need from him. Next, we have an input element with a type attribute set to file. This will give us the choose file button. Next, we have this name attribute set to image. We are going to use the name attribute in the PHP code to access the uploaded image file. Next, we have the submit button with its name attribute set to upload. Again, we will use the submit button's name attribute in the PHP code. Next, we have a paragraph element with a class of success. If the upload process is successful, the application will display a success message. And last, we have another paragraph element with a class of error. In here, the application will display any error that occurs during the upload process. We will determine using PHP which element to display. That's all the HTML code that we need. Now let's see in the browser what we did. Nice. Don't worry about the delete button, the success message and the dismiss link. Everything will come together once we start writing PHP. So let's do this. The first thing that we'll do in the functions.php file is to connect to the MySQL server and the database. But first, let's see the database that we will connect to. We have a database called tutorials_2, and inside the database we have a table named images. The images table has two columns, an ID column with a type of int and an images column with a type of varchar. The length is set to 255 characters. We are going to insert the uploaded image name in the image column. There is nothing more here to say, so let's go back to our functions.php file. As I said, the first thing that we'll do in the functions.php file is to connect to the database. We are going to write a function named connect. Inside the function, I will create a MySQLi object and I will pass in as arguments the server's name, in our case is localhost, the MySQL username, the MySQL password, and the database name. And we are going to store the returned object in the MySQLi variable. Next, I will use the MySQLi variable to access the connect error number property. In a successful connection, the value that the connect error number property returns is 0. So, if it is not 0, we are going to exit the script and display the error that the MySQL server returns. If the connection is successful, the function will return the MySQLi object. Next, we are going to write a function to insert the image file in the database and save it in the uploads folder. But before that, we'll go to the index file to access the submitted image file. Let's scroll to the top of the file and require the functions.php file so we have access to the functions that we write there. Next, I will check if there is an upload post request. We are checking for a post request because we set the forms method attribute to post. And we are checking for an upload key because we set the submit button's name attribute to upload. If there is a post request, we are going to check now if there is a file uploaded. We are going to check if the superglobal files variable, which is an array, has a key named image, which key is the choose file button's name attribute. As I said, the superglobal files variable is an array. Let's take a closer look how it is structured. Let's say we have submitted a file. We see that the files variable holds an associative array named image. The image array holds the name of the uploaded file, the full path of the file, the type of the file, in this case we uploaded a JPEG image, the temporary location where PHP stores the file. That's why we use the moveUploadedFile function to move the file from its temporary storage to a folder that we specify. In our case, it will be the uploads folder. We have an error entry with a value of 0. That means that the file is successfully uploaded. And last, we have the size of the file in bytes. Now, that's how the files variable is structured. I hope it will help you understand what's going on when we upload a file. Now let's go back to the index file to continue our code. We are going to continue with our if statement and also check if the name of the file is not empty. If so, I will call a function named insertImage and I will pass in as an argument the files array. And I will store whatever the function will return in the response variable. Else I will assign to the response variable the message please select an image file. Also, I have to declare the response variable outside the if statement so the server will not throw a warning. Now let's go to the functions.php file and write the insertImage function. I will say function insertImage and I will pass in as an argument a variable named files. The files variable will be holding the superglobal files array. The first thing that I will do inside the function is to connect to the database. Next, I will fetch the image name from the files array. And I will do the same thing with a temporary location. Now, this is important. I'm not going to do any kind of validation, of image validation. It's not in the scope of this tutorial. So don't use this code without proper image validation on a live project. I have a video on how to properly validate an image file. I will put a link in the description below. Again, it's very important to validate any file that we upload to the server. And with that said, let's continue. Now, I'm going to write a query and insert in the image column the image name. Next, I'm going to check the affected rows property, and if it's not 1, I will return a message that says error inserting image in the database. The affected rows property in our case returns the number of records that were affected by the query. Since we are inserting only one record, the expected value is 1. Therefore, if the value is not 1, it indicates that something went wrong and we return an error. Next, I will use the moveUploadedFile function to move the file from its temporary location to the uploads folder. However, I will call the function within an if statement to check if the function is not successful. Therefore, if something went wrong and the function failed to move the file, we will return an error. Next, I will close the connection to the MySQL server and I will return the string success. Now, before we move on, let's take a closer look at this code block that we have written. Do you have the feeling that something is not right? Let's examine the logic here for a minute. First, we insert the image name in the database. If something goes wrong, we return an error and the function stops here. The rest of the code will not be executed. That's fine, that's what we want. But what if the query is successful and this time the moveUploadedFile function fails to save the image file in the uploads folder? Then we will have the image name in the database but not the associated image file in the uploads folder. Now, when we try again to upload the same file and everything goes well, then we will have the image name twice in the database but only one image file in the uploads folder. This means that the image will be displayed twice and we will have a problem when we delete the image from the database and the folder. To fix this problem is super easy. I will go above the insert query and I will use the MySQLi object to call the begin transaction method. When we begin a transaction in MySQL, the data are not permanently written in the database. Instead, they are held in memory or temporary storage. Therefore, we have the option to roll back the database in its previous state. So I will go in the first if statement and I will call the rollback method if something goes wrong. And I will do the same thing in our second if statement. And last, if everything goes well, I have to commit the transaction to write the data in the database. And problem solved. Nice. But guys, I spotted an error. I have to wrap the insert query in double quotes. Now we're good to go. So let's go back to the index file and finish the upload process. When we call the insert image function, we store the returned value in the response variable. We will use the response variable to display the success message or an error if there is one. So let's go inside the upload form and under the submit button. I will open PHP tags and I will check if the response variable is equal to success. The string success is returned by the function when we have a successful upload. If this is true, we display the success message. Else we will display whatever error message the function returns. Let's upload a file to check this out. I will reload the page and I will choose an image file to upload. We see the success message. That means we have uploaded successfully the image file to the server. Nice. We see the image name in the database and the image file in the uploads folder. Now let's go back to the functions.php file to write a function to fetch the images from the database. I will name the function getImages. I will use the connect function to connect to the MySQL server and the database. Next, I will write a query where I select the ID and the image column from the images table. Next, I will create a variable named data and initialize it to an empty array. Next, I will use a while loop to fetch every entry in the database as an associative array and I will insert it in the data array. And last, I will return the data array. Now we have to go back to the index file and use the getImages function to display the images that we fetch from the database. I will go above the info element and create a variable named images and I will set it equal to the getImages function. Next, I will go inside the preview element and I will use a for-each function to loop through the images. I will escape PHP so I can insert HTML inside the loop. And I will insert the whole image wrapper element. In the image source attribute, I will insert the path to the image file, and in the atags href attribute, I will send a GET request to the same page that holds a delete image key and the image's ID. You will see why this is helpful when we delete an image. but I forgot to put the uploads folder in front of the image name in the source attribute. Now let's upload one more image file to see if the code that we've written is displaying the images. Nice, our code is working fine. Now let's go back to the index file and display the number of images that we have in the database. We will go to the info element, and inside the strong tags I will use the count function, and I will pass as an argument the images array. This will give us the total number of items that the images array holds. If we go back to the browser and refresh the page, we will see that we have 2 images in the database. Now our next task is to code the delete image action. We said earlier that we will send a GET request to the same page that holds a delete image key when we click on the delete image button. So let's go to the top of the page and fetch the request. I will check if there is a GET request that has a delete image key. If this is true, I will call a function named deleteImage and pass the image ID as an argument, which we are also sending with the GET request. And we will store whatever the function returns in a variable named deleteFunctionResponse. Now let's go to the functions.php file to write the deleteImage function. I will say function deleteImage and I will pass the variable ID as an argument. Again, I will connect to the MySQL server. Next, I will write a query to select the ID and image column from the images table. But here I will use the where keyword to fetch the database row that has an ID equal to the ID from the GET request. I wrote this query because I need the associated image name from the given ID to delete the image file from the uploads folder. So let's fetch the image name. I will create a variable named image name and I will set it equal to the associative array that the result set object returns. And since there is only one entry in the array, I can directly access the image name in one statement. Next, I will check the image name variable, and if it is equal to null, I will return a message that says that the image doesn't exist in the database, and the function will stop here. Next, as we did in the insert function, I will begin a MySQL transaction before we delete the image name and the image file. Next, I delete the image name from the database. And I will check the affected rows property if the query was successful. If not, I will call the rollback method to undo any changes, if there were any, and I will return an error. Next, I will use the fileExist function to check if the image file we want to delete exists in the folder. If the file exists, I will use the unlink function to delete the file. However, I will wrap the function in an if statement, so if something goes wrong, I can use again the rollback method and I will return an error message. And last, I will commit the transaction, I will close the database connection, and I will return a header function to refresh the index page. I'm doing this because I want to clear the GET request from the browser's URL address bar. And I saw a missing closing parenthesis in our second if statement. Okay, now let's return to the index file one last time and handle any error messages that the deleteImage function may return. I will go above the deleteImage error element, I will open PHP tags, and I will check if the deleteFunctionResponse variable holds an error. If this is true, I will escape PHP and I will insert the whole deleteImage error element inside. And in the first span element, I will display the error that the variable holds. And we are done with the code. Now let's open the browser and delete the images. Let's delete the first one. Nice. The image is successfully deleted, but we see that the server has thrown a warning. That is because we have to declare the deleteFunctionResponse variable outside the if statement in the global scope. Now let's delete the last image. And everything is working fine. And that's it, guys. We reached the end of this tutorial. But before we say goodbye, I have a video to suggest on how to properly validate an uploaded image file, since we did not done any validation in this tutorial. It will complete your knowledge about image uploads. So, thanks for watching. I hope you like the video. Subscribe if you like. See you in the next one.